Hello, welcome to the Steve Gosney Show, or whatever we're calling this thing here. Thank you for showing up. This is a very important show, and I want to get right into it. As you know, we're going to have as much time as I'm willing to, as my guest is willing to give me, but we're going to get into that right up front. You know, if we talk anything fun or promos, it'll be at the end, as is the usual here. But I first want to introduce to you my compatriot, a person who I greatly admire, who's inspired me, and that is a fellow named Herman Lindsey. Herman, welcome.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. And people kind of know the premise of this show, and I often talk about death penalty cases and wrongful convictions and this sorts of thing. But putting a face behind what I'm talking about. We see you. We are public defenders, and we deal with individuals that are wrongfully convicted, put in prison, and very hard situations, right? But I wanted to share with people that are watching me a real live face and a real live story, so they can put a person and a human being behind it. So why don't you just introduce yourself first, and then we'll get into the facts of your case and your tremendous story. So go ahead and introduce yourself and what you'd like to. I see you're wearing a shirt right there.
My name is Herman Lindsey. I'm Florida's 23rd death row survivor. I'm the executive director for Witness to Innocent and also the vice chair of Floridians Alternative to the Death Penalty here in Florida.
And I will say that I'm going to let you tell the story. The summary is you were wrongfully convicted and put on Florida's death row, and you were on death row for 3 years for a murder that occurred 12 years before your arrest. So there was a murder. There was 12 years went by. They arrested you, and then you went to trial, were sentenced to death, put on death row, served 3 years on death row during the appellate process, and the Florida Supreme Court basically came out and said that the evidence was insufficient even to say that you committed a crime, much less a murder, and released you how many years ago was that now? 8 years ago?
No, it was back in 2009. So I've been home almost 15 years now.
15 years ago. So, and the statistic that I share with a lot of my people here is that for every 3 executions in Florida, and those are people that are actually executed, but if you count up the number of executions, for every 3 people who are actually executed, 1 person is exonerated off of Florida's death row. So that is a very, very poor record of conviction. Now, I know that I have some people in the chat here. I think the first last even said, out of all the people exonerated, I'm sure statistically there are a few people that are actually committed the crime. And we aren't saying that there aren't people that didn't actually commit the crimes, but you've got to give yourself some pause when our error rate is basically 25% that we know of. Those are people that are exonerated. So with that, that's a little plug there. I have my opinion, but so go ahead. Now, how is it that were you aware of this murder when it first occurred, which was back in 94?
When it actually first occurred, no, it was a couple of days later that I found out about it.
And now the person that was accused, there was another person that was accused that was sort of someone that you knew. Is this correct? Or why don't you just give us the story of the run-up to the arrest?
It was my god brother, and the thing about that is that when we actually was charged, we wasn't charged as co-defendant. It was like he was charged with the crime solely, and I was charged with the crime solely. It wasn't we charged as co-defendants.
But now there was the thing that kind of hits me first off in your case, because I have read the case, is the 12-year gap between the murder and your arrest. So that's kind of the period I'd like to focus on first. Is tell us about that period. Like who did they accuse? How did this unfold before leading up to your arrest?
Reading from, when in my discovery, I was able to see some of the detective notes and stuff like that. And, it's crazy because it actually had a guy that actually um, came forth and said he was the one that committed the crime. It was a crazy investigation. And if I was an investigator, I would have um, been very weary of particular case. Um, for the instance side of where me and my god brother was actually being charged, throughout the 12 years, the state main witness, Mark Sims, did not even know anything about the crime. He did not know anything about the crime. In fact, it was a statement in the investigative records from another guy that said that the state witness was bragging about he committed this crime. The problem is and I'm gonna jump to now. We don't know exactly who was with Lorraine from that time. We know Lorraine pleaded guilty. Uh, I went to trial, but we don't know to this day who was exactly with Lorraine. And that's what made it so difficult because the detective had to find out who was with Lorraine. Lorraine's fingerprint was there, but they didn't believe Lorraine was actually a killer. And I don't think Lorraine was the killer because he's not that type of person to be violent or carry guns and things. There was a group of young men at that time that he was running with. They was robbing pawn shops and burglarizing pawn shops, but to say a murder, I
Well,
wouldn't.
one thing you're kind of hitting on, and I'll describe the murder first. It was a woman who was in, I think, a Dollar General store who came in the early morning.
No, a pawn shop called
A
Big
pawn
Dollar
shop.
or
Okay.
something like that.
And there were guns and there was jewelry stolen. There were guns stolen, and she was shot in the back of the head in the office, right? Is this in the morning, I think is what it was. Is that correct?
I'm not sure remembering what time it is. I mean, I
Anyways,
used to answer
this
because I
was the
don't.
nature of the murder. It was a robbery. And one of the things that, it's interesting because just hearing the first thing I'm listening to, my lawyer hat, I feel like I'm, talking to my client for the first time in jail. Tell me what happened. And this is often what you get from people that are actually innocent, which is, I don't know what happened. I know this and I know this, and you're trying to piece it together and puzzle it. But see, this is why the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt is on the state. Because if you didn't do it, you're trying to help out. You don't know what happened. And, like you say, you have a personal involvement on it and you would love to know all the details. But if you weren't there, you can't really figure it out, nor do you have the resources or the ability to prove really anything related to the case. That's the state's job. And so it's interesting hearing you talk. I hear in my ears some of my other clients that I've had to represent who are actually innocent. And this is the first barrier a defense attorney comes up with, is that you're trying to establish a negative. And you're like, well, why didn't you do it? Well, I don't have any clue what you're even talking about. You're sort of lost, and you're not being very helpful. Yeah, because how do you show what didn't happen, right? All right, I'm just observing there for my client,
Well,
what do
well,
you think about that?
that's the thing about some of these detectives that work. Is like, for instance, I feel like if I wouldn't have been honest, I wouldn't have never been arrested. If you say you read the report at the beginning when they first asked me, um, do I know anything about it, and they're telling me about. Excuse me, my dog is.
Okay.
My dog is at the. She hear the voice of you here, so I told at the beginning. They asked me, have I ever been there? I told them the truth that I had been there, and in fact, I had pawned my Sega game in an alias name because I had ticket warrants at the time. You know, I was honest. That came used against me in court. They asked me, did I see Lorraine with any jury or anything like that? I told the truth. And I say, matter of fact, he did, because I helped him take it to the flea market to sell it. You know, I was being honest, and from me being honest, I turned into a murderer, and that's crazy.
Well, and this is why, we defense attorneys are saying do not talk to the police. The Fifth Amendment is there for a reason, and that is your attempts to help, your attempts to solve the crime, and your attempts to cooperate are used as a weapon against you to say, aha, look, he admits that he was there. Right? When you didn't, it's like you were saying, I've been to that place. I have some association. I know I'm, on the periphery. And this is the thing a lot of police have a difficult time understanding too, is that not everybody's guilty. There are people called witnesses and witnesses who have information, but the pressure to solve the crime oftentimes gets the better of them. Then it becomes confirmation bias. Once the target gets laid on you, all of those words come back and boomerang and hit you.
I mean, let me ask you a question from being a prosecutor and an attorney. Most young people don't know, when for instance, I encountered with the police at that time. I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm not really worried about it. But, they're asking me questions and I'm answering it. A person that is actually that committed a crime, most likely going to say they don't want to talk to the police or try to dodge it. But what in most situations that some of the people that they arrest, and assume or say they answer questions suspicious or whatever, they really don't know. We be trying to be honest, and and it's like we end up that prime suspect.
Right. Well, and this is just again emphasizing what defense attorneys are often advising, but it unfolds now. So you get arrested for this crime. What is your first reaction?
Actually, I was laughing. I was kind of, to me, it was funny because I'm like, y'all definitely got the wrong man. So y'all ain't got y'all ducks and keys together because y'all picked me up for this, and I had nothing to do with it. So
now you went to this was in Broward County Jail. Here's another point that I talk about a lot, and I love having somebody like yourself on who is just willing to talk about things from front to back, soup to nuts. And I say one of the things that these expectations of people that are newly arrested is that the defense attorney will come parachuting in within 2 minutes to talk to them and to argue on them and get them out of jail. And I'm like, that is not the reality of the way the system works. So can I ask you first, you're arrested, you're booked into the jail, you do your first appearance. When is the first time that you see an attorney?
Oh, I mean, in Broward County, I seen one at magistrate court that advised me not to speak to anyone, the routine stuff. And I didn't see another attorney. I think that was in March. I got arrested. I didn't see another attorney until my arraignment in May.
So March, April, May. So really 60 days from your first appearance, you were arraigned, and that's where you plead guilty or not guilty. And that was the first time you really saw an attorney.
Yes.
And so this is, and you can't bond out on a murder charge. Now you say that you were told not to talk to anybody. However, we know about those jail phone calls. And oftentimes everything you say can and will be used against you. And
but those jail calls that was played was before I was even arrested.
Oh, okay. So, right, because you were in on a different charge.
Correct.
So now you see your public defender. You had a public defender?
No, I had two private attorneys.
Okay, what did you hire them, or were they appointed?
Court appointed.
Court appointed. Okay, so the other suspect had the public defender, right?
I'm not sure who he had.
All right. So then you go to trial at some point. Now, during this whole process, you're maintaining your innocence. You're talking with your lawyers, and you at some point you go to trial. What's the distance of time between your arrest and the time that you actually go to trial?
I don't quite remember, but I know it was towards the end of that same year I was arrested.
So it was within a year that you got your trial.
Yes.
Okay, well that's pretty quick.
My trial came somewhere in November, December, something like that.
Now, at the trial, can you summarize? Because like the Florida Supreme Court case kind of does a good job of summarizing it. But basically, you were living in a house where a Crown Royal bag that had jewelry in it was associated. Maybe you summarize the entirety of the evidence against you, because it's key about the exoneration is about the lack of evidence, the fact that you were somewhere in this orbit, but it was not, the evidence against you was really non-existent. They couldn't even, if the evidence, even in the light most favorable to the state, was basically that there was no crime that they could prove against you. So give us like what the evidence that they presented to the jury was.
They presented, the medical examiner spoke about the cause of death. There was the introduction of the pawn shop slip that I told them I had been there. There was some, my ex-wife, who in her testimony said straight out that they basically told her what to say, and that they threatened to take the kids if she didn't make a statement, and that they promised her a $10,000 reward that she didn't get. The phone redactions from when I was talking to my mom in prison, and Mark Sims, who said I confessed to him in a holding cell. And I think that's about it.
Right. Then the ex-wife is the one that sets, she's the one that connects you to the Crown Royal bag with the jewelry, right? That was her.
Right. But see, that's the thing. When we was in trial, the state moved to impeach her. They was arguing like they was married. I was to the state, you're not gonna win. And she straight out said, okay, if you want me to tell the truth, then the truth is, I told you I didn't know anything about Herman being involved in this. The only reason I gave that statement is because you was threatening to take my kids. You kept harassing me at my job. You kept harassing my grandmother. And you said the detective basically told me what to say. And y'all said y'all was going to give me a $10,000 reward with. And if you look at it too, it is that when you speak about that Royal Crown bag, the distinguishedness of it, if you look through the investigation, there was never a mention of a Royal Crown bag.
Oh, really?
Out the whole, and my lawyer went objecting to them saying about the Royal Crown bag, because they brought the pawn shop owner in, and the pawn shop owner spoke of things that was missing, and he specifically highlighted Royal Crown bag. But throughout the whole investigation, throughout the time when it was investigating the crime scene, it was never mentioned a Royal Crown bag.
So this was a detail that becomes highlighted once they discover a Royal Crown bag or something like that association is made with the witness.
Like right now, I cannot directly say that the Royal Crown bag of jewelry that he had actually came from this. I cannot directly say that, right? And because I said that in a statement to the police, and all of a sudden in trial, for the first time ever, here goes somebody mentioning that a Royal Crown bag was missing.
What a nightmare. Okay, before I want to we got a lot to go here, but there's a couple questions that I thought we'd say is, now, you did, during the trial, the run up to the trial, you were in the Broward County Jail, correct?
Yes.
And now, what can you say about the conditions in the Broward County Jail?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been to the Broward County Jail. They might have some improvements.
Right.
But back then, I was kind of in and out. Being honest, I was in and out in jail. To me, it's like a normal jail. It wasn't so. It was more open. Now they went to lockdown half a day, lockdown the other half. But as far as the cleanliness is not there. It's maintained a dirty place. Most of the guards are nice and respectful. And as long as you respect them, they're gonna give you respect. As you have some bad apples, but I can't degrade Broward County Jail, because they was I didn't experience anything traumatic.
Well, that's good. It's not. This isn't all. We're just trying to get I want to get an understanding of your experience before we start. I mean, you have a very distinct and unique experience, and I want to share it with as many people as possible and as honestly as possible. Girl Scout is asking, I'm confused about the appointed private attorney. What happens, for example, if the fellow that was there was another fellow that was charged on this murder, right? And he could get the public defender's office, for example. Well, if he's pointing the finger at you, then you can't have the same.
Actually, I don't think that was even the case. Because as I'm thinking about it, I think he had court appointments too. I think what it was someone that was either a witness or I think Mark Sims had used the public defender's office before, and they wouldn't allow us the public defenders to represent us.
It's a conflict situation, and that's very common. So it's not anything unique, but that just answers the question. All right, so now, when the guilty verdict comes down, what is your reaction to that?
I mean, the reaction was the whole courtroom felt solid because we had some other attorneys also in the courtroom following the case. And when the guilty verdict came down, I don't even think the state attorney believed that it actually happened. So it's like everybody was shocked. Like how? What do you? On what grounds? How do you find him guilty? We was all surprised.
And then, of course, after that's done, there's a whole penalty phase where your life is spread before the court, and you end up getting a death sentence. So, what is this about? What's that like?
Let me tell you a little bit that happened, and I want to bring this out. That happened in between the penalty guilt phase and the penalty phase, and why it took so long for my penalty phase to come up. So I was a trustee in the county jail after I got found guilty, and I actually was going to the elevator to pick up the lunches, and the state key witness was going downstairs to medical. So when we got by each other, I asked him, I say, why are you lying on me? You don't even know me. He say, it's nothing personal. It's payback. I got to do what I got to do to set myself free. So we took 4 officers and a sergeant that was there, and we asked for a newly discovered, we asked for a motion for new trial. Hold on one second.
No, I got it. That's all right. This is no formal thing. This is just all personal.
So she brought the officers in. They testified to it. She denied the motion for new trial. So while we're waiting for the denial, I was in the holding cell where waiting to go back from court, and they were all. Can you hold on one second?
No problem.
Can y'all just stop all of that talking?
So,
Stop all that
what
talking.
this is a motion for a new trial. What he's talking about is it's a
So-
motion for new trial based on newly discovered evidence. And the newly discovered evidence is now one of the witnesses who speaks against you, who is basically making statements that is
Have
nothing
motive.
personal, but yeah, I got to do what I got to do to get out, right?
Right. So he made it personal. So it goes back to his characteristic. So while we was waiting in the cell and waiting go back, they made a mistake and put him in the same cell with me. And the officers, we have to keep separate, but the officers missed it. So when he came in, a couple of guys wanted to jump on him because he's labeled as a snitch. And I said, "Dog, that God had him." And me and him sat down, was talking. The two officers and a lieutenant, I think, came in also and listening to the conversation me and him have. And he's admitting he never even had this conversation on me. He never had this conversation with me. The detective was just going to help him get some time off. So he was trying to get some time off, and he was telling all of it out. And we moved for another newly discovered evidence, which we brought 35 inmates that night up to testify. And they all testified the same thing, that he said, we never had this conversation. He don't know me. He only seen me once or twice before in the street because he know I was Lil Ray God brother. And the lieutenants and the officers did the same thing. And we moved for a newly discovered evidence. And again, it was denied.
Yeah, so this is a judge discretionary thing. And so that has to occur in a relatively short period of time after the conviction, which is what happens. So this is I actually had a very good Rumble interview with a fellow who's a professor in the University of Alabama, who's written a book on jailhouse snitches because they are in such pressure to conform, to give the prosecutors what they want, give the police what they want. His opinion is that jailhouse snitches should not even be ever used, that they are completely and wholly unreliable. And and what you're saying, part of what resulted in a conviction that you had was somebody who was coming forward and said, "Oh yeah, my buddy over here, he confessed everything. Tell me what he confessed to again." And then they bring that into the guilt phase, and then it's like, "Oh, now you're going to give me a break on my sentence." When you're facing 30, 40 years and you say, "I'll give you 10 years, 20 years off," are you going to lie for that? I don't know. That's a test, right? That's one of those tests. And a lot of people will, especially people in prison, cellmates. So that the pressures are so great for that person to lie and give the police what they want, that his opinion is that it's completely unreliable. It's never reliable, should never be used. And your case is one in which that happened. But then it requires a judge who's willing to listen, is willing to actually apply the law, to give the benefit of the doubt to the defendant, and to to grant a new trial in this case. But you didn't have that, so you then get into a penalty phase.
And that's the thing that kind of hurts. Before we had this interaction, my attorneys brought forth a statement by another individual that was a co-defendant of Mark Sims on one of Mark Sims' cases. He had gave statement to the detective that Mark Sims was bragging about he committed this crime. Now, we couldn't use that, for one, because when they brought Eddie back, Eddie acted like he couldn't remember the statement. The detective on the stand, that was a detective at the time, adopted it and said that, yes, he did give us that statement, right? And with that being said, it's like, here it is. You had other evidence to show that this witness you have a great motive to lie, but yet you allowed it. You allowed your case to be based on that as your strong key evidence.
So at the pen, so there's a separate trial in a death case. In a first-degree murder case, there's a separate, if they're seeking death, and they go through a whole nother trial, which is aggravators and mitigators. And at some point, you are sentenced to death in Florida, in Broward County. Now, I can't imagine. It's hard. I'm sure there's no words to describe that feeling. But I mean, how do you recall that, and how does that, looking back, I mean, what kind of person were you at that time, and how did you take it? And I mean, share me what you can about that kind of experience.
I took it calm. Everybody tell you I was calm. You know, most of my mind was like in a numb state, a denial state. You know, I understood that I just got convicted, but I also knew there's nothing I could do. I had to trust in God and trust in my attorneys. When they handed down the sentence of death, my lawyer had came to me a couple of days before and say, you know, it's no doubt about it. I believe this judge is going to give you a death sentence because this is she just got death qualified, and this will be her first death penalty case going up to the Supreme. And that judge later got taken off the bench from mishandling cases, but my lawyer explained to me that, okay, your appeal, you have good appeal issues. I still don't understand how you got a strong JOA argument. And, you know, he said, just keep your head up. So, you know.
And that with strong JOA, that's a judgment of acquittal argument. And that is exactly what it eventually did exonerate you. But people know that's a motion saying the evidence as taken, even if believed, is insufficient to convict you. And in fact, the Florida Supreme Court ultimately said the evidence wasn't even sufficient to have you guilty of any crime at all and ordered your immediate release. So, but before we get there, so you go from there. How long does it take you to get to death row from that courtroom?
Once they handed down the sentence, and I can remember they said, we the people of the state of Florida hereby sentence you to die by lethal injection. From that moment, they walked me straight out the courtroom, took me downstairs. They didn't take me back to my cell. They took me to medical, where they put me on suicide watch. And the next morning, I was transported to FSP.
Now, a lot of people, and you spent 3 years awaiting your appeal. So a death penalty case is an automatic.
Now, I spent 18 months waiting on my appeal.
Say again?
I only spent 18 months waiting on my appeal.
18 months waiting on your appeal. You mean that was before it was even filed?
No, that's with it being filed and that's with it being filed and ruled on. Okay.
So now first of all, describe for people what death row is like in Florida. There's Florida State Prison in Rayford is our only state prison. The rest of them are correctional institutions, and death row is in Rayford. What is the conditions like on death row?
The conditions, the living conditions, as far as institutional wise, is very, very filthy. FSP is one of the first prisons they built in the state of Florida, and it has ventilating shafts and stuff like that, and it's dusty. It's not constantly cleaned. There's no air conditioning, so when it's hot outside, it's hot inside. When it's cold outside, it's cold inside. You know, the guards back then, the guards was like wishy-washy. You got 1 minute you might have a good guard, 1 minute you might have a guard that, you know, one of those guards that say they don't feel like doing showers tonight. So since they don't feel like doing showers tonight, anybody that want to take a shower is going to take straight cold showers. You can't get no hot water tonight. So that'll make a lot of people don't want to go take a shower because it's cold already. As far as the people, the inmates, I felt right at home when I got there. And what I mean by that is that when I first got there, I was afraid. You know, I was walking down that long hall, and then the officer made sure he showed me the death wing where they do the execution Q wing, and he took me into the doors of G wing and put me in my cell. And I had the vision when I seen these bars and the people behind the bars. I had the visions like these are all like monsters finna reach out at me and get me and things like that. But when I got in the cell, they went to trying to talk to me, ask me my name, and I was afraid to say my name or anything. You know, I didn't want to do that. But then I did answer, and when I did answer, you know, they was asking me where county you from and things, and next thing you know, the guard was bringing me a bag because what they did was take a pillowcase and send it to every cell there, and every cell sent an item in there that I may need, like hygiene, soup, or coffee, or cigarettes, or anything like that, and gave it to me, and that I was more comfortable. And as I spent time there, you know, we had some nice, intelligent conversations, you know, and we went out played basketball together, and it's like you wouldn't know that these men are here for such a serious crime. You know, to me, you know,
How
it
much
was.
interaction did you have with your fellow death row inmates?
I mean, we constantly talking because as far as physically, we couldn't physically see each other because they wasn't letting us out the cell. Now they got a day room. They let them out to interact. But I mean, we used to play chess outside the cell. You know, put our chessboard outside in a mirror and play chess. We have conversation. We was all in sports. You know, all talk about a lot of subjects. You know,
So
and
who was so who you had people on either side of you, right? And did you have
yes,
people and did you have people across from you?
no, nobody across from me. It's a room behind me, and then I have two rooms above and two rooms below.
Okay. And so you had a relatively you didn't have any threats of you. Now, well, let me ask you this because you said that you were in prison. You had been in Florida prisons before,
Yes.
in correctional institutions. How would you compare the death row experience to the inmates' experience in a correctional institution?
I mean, it's about the same, except for you don't. I have not seen any violent activity when I was on death row. You know, they all stick together for one thing, so guards know that. And I haven't seen in the way they have to just come in and beat people up or anything like that. Like some people allege. The time I was there, but the living conditions. I like the freedom of moving out, moving around, and going to the store, going to the rec yard when I like to. Uh, and you just can't do that on death row. But other than that, as far as the inmate wise, I think that it's more calmer on death row than it is on regular population.
Now, how did you deal with your faith when here you find yourself wrongfully convicted on death row? Were there people that were there for you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we had the pen pal. My mom used to write me, and my dad, and sometimes my kids. But you know, as far as faith, my faith was up and down, because you know it's like how you can have faith that you know everybody telling me you know you got to wait for the appeal, your process, and I'm seeing people that 10, 15 years before they even get any kind of relief or a new trial or anything like that. I didn't think I was going home. I thought I was have to go to a new trial and I was going to win at the new trial, but I ended up going home um, up under that decision. But how can you have faith in the same system that convicted you?
Well, actually, And one of the things that I deal with, because I have a lot of people, most of my people are life. I mean, I do have a death qualification. I've got a death penalty case right now. But one of the things that I get a lot from family members who will call me of people who've been convicted and maybe serving life sentences. And they often come at me with, well, I have a lot of faith and I just believe in the system. And I say, I don't believe in the system. I believe in God. And the system is a human-made and flawed construct. And that is a wrong place to put your faith, because you will be sadly disappointed if you put your faith in the system. Now, you've got a positive story that comes out at the end, but I really think it's a mistake to say I believe in the system, because the system is fundamentally flawed, because humans occupy it and humans are fundamentally flawed. God is where you put your faith. I mean, maybe I'm asking you about faith in the system, and about hope and despair on death row about your circumstance, and then how that affects your faith in your religious faith in God.
It didn't affect my belief. I believe in God, and that's that. I know all things happen through Him. So,
and there's I know we have, what's it, Father, who's the priest that comes to death row? Father, right? So tell me about it. Did you get to meet him?
I met a lot of them, like Brother Dale, Susan Carey. They come out doing a lot of people come out during holidays and give out cookies and gift cards and stuff like that. So,
how important is it for people that are inside the inmates to have connections to the outside, of family that tell them their love and their children? This is, as somebody who's been through the worst of the worst. If somebody has a loved one inside, could you tell what it means to you when you get some connection from outside?
I mean, it's very important, and that's what lifts your spirits up and keep you going. And sadly to say, they having a problem right now. I just got a phone call today from Italy. The way they've made the system now is that if you have relatives out of the United States, you're not able to get mail through their system. Their system is not recognized and organized. Luckily, back then we had regular mail, and what made a great time with me, I had pen pals to write with and talk to and things like that. And they wouldn't never let me have a dull moment on death row. So,
okay, well, and let me ask you about now going back to the appellate process. What was your communication like with your appellate attorney, and how did you see that from before you get the decision? How did you find it as an appellate attorney? I want to know. This is a selfish question, because I deal with clients all the time, mostly in writing. How did you find that appellate process?
My appellate process, I got a letter from my attorney, Jeffrey Anderson, and shortly after I got the initial brief, and the brief system went up, the brief process went on, and then I got the inmates on death row got up and woke me up one day when they was doing the oral argument, because we could see all our oral arguments online on TV, whether the Florida channel. So it was we sat there and watched my oral arguments, and to my amaze, it's like Justice Quinn and Justice Priente and them, they was actually arguing the law with the state attorney and asking the state attorney, what is the evidence? Where's the evidence? And one quoted, well, in a sense, where's the beef? If you had to say, where's the beef in this case? Where's the beef? And that right there, what changed my life. Seeing Justice Priente and Justice Quinn sitting down, holding the state attorney accountable to represent the evidence that should be used against me. That made me change my whole outlook on life. That's why I don't hesitate to try to to speak out or to bring awareness around the situation.
Well, now, how did you learn that when the opinion came down? How did you learn that you were going to be a free man off death row?
Actually, we had a pretty sexy psychologist, and every time she come on the wing, she bring out who need to talk to her and stuff like that. So this particular day, she came with the lieutenant, which me and the lieutenant was okay. I always joke with him everybody jokes with him when he come on the road. And he's just a cool old fella. Think he a pimp. So they came to my cell and they had a paper in their hand, and they said they came to take my TV and my fan. On death row, your TV and your fan is everything, because that's your TV in your cell and the fan to keep you from getting so hot. And it was summertime, and I'm like, why you want to take my fan? I mean, I ain't did nothing. And I kept pleading and saying that, and they kept escalating like I got a DR or something. Where the DR at? What DR got? And then I went technical with the law, with the policy, and said, well, don't I supposed to have a committee, a DR hearing before y'all take it? Like, no. I said, well, where's the DR? And she handed me what I thought would be the DR, and it was actually out the newspaper where they had declared me. Florida Supreme Court had ruled unanimously. All 7 judges ruled, and they said that's very unusual on a direct appeal. And I just dropped to my knee and smiled.
I can't imagine. And how quickly did you get out from the delivery of that letter? Because usually there's a 30-day wait for a mandate. Did you get immediately released, or
no?
You have to wait.
You have to wait 14 days. You have to wait 14 days to see if the state going to appeal it.
And how hard was that 14 days?
I don't know. I think it went by fast because I already know, but I wasn't scared that they was on appeal it, because even if they appeal it, I had other merits to go for a new trial. And I don't know. I was just thinking of home, my kids,
Wow. So so you get out off of death row for 3 years. Now, what is it and that was, what year was that?
That was 2009.
2009. So it's hard to even comprehend what you went through. I mean, as somebody, I've got my little world and our bubble, and I'm sure everybody that's watching this, we've got our lives and our bubbles and our worlds. Thankfully, very few people have had to deal with what you've dealt with. What lessons, what wisdom did you come away with that you want to share with just people who are just average folks out there?
I think that people need to understand that a lot of cases on death row, and plenty of attorneys can say this, don't warrant the death penalty for one. And it's, if you actually meet some of them guys, you wouldn't even believe the charges that they're actually charged with. And when you say consider the worst of the worst, well, you got people in prison for the same thing that they're on death row for, and then you got the one I consider the most hindrance death penalty case is when the person is actually just a mere driver, or the person that didn't actually take part of that murder, and he's on death row. So I don't know.
What you're doing is you're shining a light on the injustice of the death penalty in Florida. And now you do. I'm plugging here. Now I hope you don't mind, but we do have a book on this subject called Death Penalty Debates, which you have in your hands. I know I gave you one, so I want you to review it. And I guess that with the error, there's so many arguments against. There are some arguments for, so we have to give the devil his due. But the fact that we have innocent people, the percentages, the possibility of executing an innocent person, to me is not only anti-Christian, it is fundamentally morally evil. And we really need to, it's a system. And as people bring out the examples of the people, well, what about this person who's guilty and the mass murderer and this fellow? And they use examples like that. Yes, those people exist, but so do people like yourself. And they all get swept up into a system because the prosecutors use this as a weapon. So I wanted to, put it, everybody knows the Nicholas Cruzes of the world or the Ted Bundys of the world. But it's amazing that we do know that, but we don't know the Herman Lindseys of the world, the people who have been exonerated. And Florida is #1 in the country for death row exonerations, which is a very sad. And we have now, and I will also add, as a lawyer dealing with this right now, we have been in the last few years chipping away very strongly at all of the barriers to wrongful conviction. For example, the reasonable hypothesis of innocence rule, which requires a JOA, a judgment of acquittal motion, to be granted when there is a reasonable hypothesis of innocence. In your case, that is the reason that you're off. And that rule has been chipped away by the Florida Supreme Court. And that greatly increases the chances of an innocent person being executed. So I'm opining a little bit, but now I'm going to shift into another thing because, and I told you this beforehand. I'm going to say this to your face, buddy. I met you, first time I met you, you were at a death penalty conference speaking to the lawyers who are public defenders like me, who do trial work and capital appellate work in Florida. And I remember you speaking, and it was so powerful that I shed a tear. I mean, it was so emotional listening to you, and you were thanking the public defenders and all the people in that room. And I never got a chance. You zipped off, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you because, of course, we're locked in these little classrooms taking notes, right? So I didn't have the chance to really. Now I have this channel, and I saw you at the last death penalty conference, which was over at Disney this last week. And I said, Herman, you don't know me, but I want you on my Rumble channel. And we had another nice conversation. And I'm so happy that you came. But you also gave some great encouraging words to all those hardworking public defenders who I will say are brilliant lawyers. I mean, we have the team of people in that Capitol room are the best of the best when it comes to criminal defense on a lot of very difficult circumstances. So I don't know. I can't thank you enough for the encouragement that you give me and my fellow professionals who are working and advocating for inmates and for people who like yourself. I mean, maybe you can echo on that, but I want to just, you don't need to, but I want to thank you for that.
One thing I have to say, you see this shirt? I'm the wrong way.
Witness to Innocent,
right? Witness to Innocent is an organization, and our membership are mainly death row exonerees around the United Nations. And well, not in the United Nations, but around the nation,
right?
United States. We have some connections with international. But if you go on that website, you will see my story is not just a unique one. These stories are going on. In fact, we just got a guy out of Oklahoma that's exonerated, Mr. Simmons. This is not a story that's ending. It's adding and adding. And the sad part about it, we just found the first case. I don't quote me on this, but I'll make sure I get it to you. Where they just exonerated him, but he had already died, been executed.
Oh, right. Okay, well, let's talk about, because one of the things in death penalty debates, people know Eileen Wuornos, they know Ted Bundy, they know Nicholas Cruz, all right? But do they know Herman Lindsey? Do they know Frank Lee Smith? Do they know George Stinney? Do they know Sharif Cousin? Do they know Gary Gallagher? Do they know Ray Crone? Do they know Ricky Ray Rector? So, but these are all people. I'll bet you that nobody knows those names.
I
But those are
do.
all people. Well, okay.
They're part of our organization.
Yeah, your organization. But what you're saying, and this is the thing, if you do a little, it doesn't take much research. Go to where can they find witness to innocence? You just do a little research. You will find that the number of exonerees, when you start reading the stories, it's a chilling exercise, but one that you should, because everybody wants to learn about the serial killers, but they don't want to hear about the failures of the system because they want to have this delusion that the system's perfect and doesn't have errors like what you're talking about. So where could they go to learn more about your organization, about these cases? Go ahead, give them your spiel.
I encourage everybody to join us, witnessinnocent.org, because it's very important. Being on death row is one thing, but life after exoneration is like serving a life sentence in society, because whenever we try to go get a job or we try to rent a place, the background check prevent us. I even got denied an Airbnb. And the sad thing about it is that most of us do not get compensated. Florida has 30 death row exonerees. Only 4 out of the 30 have been compensated for that wrongful conviction. And we at Witness to Innocent, we try to be a supplement in their lives and give them support. And it's like bringing them out to speak. That give us an opportunity to give them a source of income, so they can pay their bills and things like that. And we have peer support classes, and we just enjoy meeting new people.
Well, and I'll say, I'm going to switch this out. There we go. So in death penalty debates, if you look on the back, it says recommended for further study. And there's the great Death Penalty Information Center, the Innocence Project, National Registry of Exonerations, and Witness to Innocence. So in the book, you'll see the website where Herman is I think you're a director of that project.
Executive director.
Right. So it's a great resource that I used partially to develop some of the content of the book. So I love it. I really loved your encouragement that you've given all of us. And I don't know, if for nothing else, I'm humbled to be, I don't know. It's kind of a mixed feeling I have, because on the one hand, it's a walking, living, talking example of such the evils of this system. On the other hand, the system worked in your case. Your lawyers did their job. It gives us encouragement. It's quite a complex set of feelings that comes about when I speak with you. And but it makes my brain work and it makes me think. And I guess if nothing else, thank you for that. Right.
You're welcome.
Any final thoughts that you have? What about you guys, chat? I guess I should look at the chat real quick, see if anybody has. I knew this wasn't going to be a big super chat or rumble rant stream, but this is one of the most important streams that I've ever done, because I wanted people to see the face behind the files. When we're talking about people who were exonerated, it's not just some faceless person. It's a real human being who is now facing a lifetime of struggles. Like you said, I mean, when they look you up, it's like, oh, here's this Mr. Lindsey. Is this you? You killed somebody? Right. And then all of a sudden you've got to go through the explain. They don't want to hear that. It's like, well, better to steer clear of that person. Right. It's like, what do you do now? And I don't know. I mean, the fact that you haven't been destroyed and crushed by it, that you're taking this and putting your efforts into something positive is, I'll tell you, a lot of people could learn from you, I will say. So let me just real quick here. Go ahead and add something while I check through here. We've got a job well done.
Well,
George.
if anybody want to ask a question, tell them feel free to ask whatever they want to ask.
I gotta go. I haven't been looking at the chat, so if they can send money, and I will definitely read it. But to like, but I mean, it's my stream. People don't delay. They pay me money to drink, so to ask questions. So let me just review because I have a really educated chat here. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Molten Salt, good to see you. Let's see. I don't know. That's not so. Let's look back on the other one. Okay. Oh, and then we have Gene XO, Gigi. Good to see you, Gigi. Hell Pike. Let's see. Glitter. And I'm not using that. We've had a clean stream. We're not using your whole moniker, but good to see you. Here you can see it there. Let's see. Catherine Cases, thank you for sharing your story. And then I'll look at that. Gene, read Herman's story, A Witness to Innocence, where he's executive director. So there's the website if you all want to look at that. Otto is here. Kaylee says, you are an inspiration.
Thanks.
And let's see. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. I'm sure it's hard to take because, I mean, how do you really take that? I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, you spent this time on death row and went through all this process, and I'm sure the hatred and the difficulties and the lack of sympathy and the injustice that you've seen, and now for somebody to say thanks, it's not enough.
I don't have no hatred. In fact, I don't regret what happened to me. I really don't. I look at it as God took me through something to be a voice. Because I can have someone such as yourself go talk about the death penalty and these miscarriages of justice, and people will pay attention. But then somebody like myself can get on there and say it, and it attracts their attention. They involved in it. They want to know what they can do to help, and I think that's what God took me through that for, so it's a painful, hurtful moment in my life, a scary moment in my life, but I am so grateful. That's why anybody reach out to me, I try to speak. I try to, if it's getting education and awareness out there, I'm about that.
Well, I've got a couple questions here. What is the biggest or hardest thing to adjust life out of prison?
I got married, and I've
Get married.
So so you gotta let me finish because my wife will think I'm talking
about you off right there. Okay, that's enough.
So I got married, and I do multiple things. I work with mental illness, juveniles, addicts, you name it. And I had got so mentally backed up with that. So I relocated, and one of the hardest thing is this relocation for me, because I'm a mama boy. I'm used to being home close to mama, as people I can call, and, I got, help, but I'm up here by myself with me and my wife, and we're trying to start life over, and just, but good thing I ran into you because you're not too far away from me, so you can call me and we can go have a couple of drinks sometimes. But it's just
any day, man.
It's just, trying to do right and seeing, trying to do right as in seeing what needs to be done.
Well, one of my favorite people is in chat right now. Upon the Horizons in Rumble chat. And he says, well, that is a generous spirit of forgiveness, definitely a God thing. He's a very religious man. We talk faith here. We're not ashamed to talk about our faith here over on my channel, because it's part of who I am, part of who you are, and it's part of who we are. And I don't think we need to hide our faith. Here's another question for you. you have thoughts on the death penalty changing from unanimous to 8-4 in Florida?
Think about this. My jury verdict was 8-4. My jury. But my thing about that is the reason the change was made. To me, and I'm gonna speak for me, I believe that our justice system worked just as it was designed to do in the Cruz case. Some may differ, and the reason I say this is that we have aggravator mitigations and mitigation, aggravators and mitigators. The jury found that them four jurors found that mitigation circumstances stood there and outweighed uh, uh, outweighed and contributed to the this sad incident. And I think by them doing what they felt was the right thing, we our legislation, and I'm not going to say my legislation because a lot of them was against this, actually against this. Um, but some people thought it didn't turn out the way they want it to be or way they believed it to be, and makes the jury feel like our system is not did not work. You messed up our system when that wasn't the case.
Right.
And
Actually, and did you sit through, and I'll share with the people here that just watching, just us three people, me, you, and you in there. Okay. We actually had two jurors who were two life voting jurors from the Cruz case who spoke to us at our death penalty conference. Did you get a chance to listen to either of those two jurors?
yeah, I met them.
And I will say that I was very, very impressed by these people. I didn't quite know what to expect when I met them, or when they said that these people were going to be speaking. It wasn't advertised, and of course they kind of maintain their anonymity. But it was, I'll tell you, they were impressive, brilliant, thoughtful people. These were not people who were acting out of some whimsy. They took their job extremely seriously.
Extremely serious.
And I was humbled and impressed by those two jurors that we met. I mean, what was your impression of them?
I defend them heavily, as I say. And when we finally see, it's just like this. Our system isn't designed for exonerations. It's not designed for exonerations. And our system isn't really designed for jurors to pay attention to the law and get it right. There is designed to just, hey, give us a verdict. In this case, those jurors weighed that evidence. They looked at the causes of what led him up to be that, which is, to me, a very powerful mitigation circumstance.
Right. And basically, there was a lot of emphasis was placed on fetal alcohol syndrome and the fact that this kid had no chance from birth and was failed by the system in multiple ways, and young, and basically we don't execute the mentally ill. And that was the civilized society doesn't do that, was kind of the bottom line. But we spent an hour and a half with these two jurors, and they went through it very, very impressively, I will say. And I was, you were there, they were there, and this is the kind of thing that really helps us do our job better. And I always hear what was kept echoing in my mind. I'm quite the critic of the prosecutor's offices across our state, our great state, some more than others, but let's just say that I'm critical. And one of the things I'm critical about is that they love to get up there and say, we have this great burden, and we take that burden, we accept that burden, and we respect the jury, and we respect the jury's verdict. But then when they don't get the way they want, all of a sudden, we're going to go running to the legislature to change the rules so that we can get it our way. Well, did you really respect that jury then? Seems to me that's showing a lack of respect for the jury system.
Yeah.
And I will say that I'm a big believer in the unit. So people understand, you had an 8-4 death verdict. What had happened, there's a whole evolution of case law in Florida. And there was a time in which it was non-unanimous. Then the court struck down the death penalty in Florida. They reinstituted a statute that made it unanimous again, based on some cases. It's very complex. And then recently they came back and they made it non-unanimous again. And I'm working, that's one of the things that I and our team, and you've seen that room full of capital people that are brainstorming to make our arguments, to make them the best we can, to make sure that, to try to make our best arguments that unanimity is required under the law. And it's a lot of work, but this is what I'm fighting for in my office, in my job. And your encouragement and those jurors and seeing the system, it's our duty to protect the innocent. And to me, if you have 3 jurors who don't feel the death is appropriate, or maybe don't feel that the person is guilty, that to me is reasonable hypothesis. That is not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because these jurors are presumed to be reasonable, aren't they? We've got a collection of reasonable jurors, and if a bunch of them don't agree, then it seems to me that's reasonable doubt. So I'm going to continue this battle. We have more to go. It's 9:12, and let's just make sure we don't have anything more here. God bless you all, and God bless you, Herman Lindsey, and Witness to Innocence. And if you have questions, I'm sure you can contact him through his organization. Please go to his website and review. Do yourself a favor and review these cases of innocence. Learn as much about them as you do about the guilty people who go and, the mass murderer, the sensational serial killer. Go and learn. For every one of those, you make a little project and go learn about somebody who was exonerated off of death row. Balance out that equation a little bit, because the media doesn't want that. Doesn't want you to know about it. So with that, I'm going to let you go. God bless you, and good night. All right. So hold on just one second.